I've seen so many men who complain about abdication of responsibility in other people, and they gripe and they moan about it when the proper attitude is to be grateful that other people aren't doing it. Why? Because you have the opportunity to do it. We wouldn't be listening to this podcast if I just bitched and moaned about it and didn't do anything about it. Somebody else would have filled the void that I filled. I looked at it as an opportunity, and this is why Order of Man is on the map where it is today, leading the men's movement, is because I wasn't upset about it. I was grateful that I acknowledged an opportunity and stepped into that path. Kipp, long time no see, man. Glad to be back with you through digital medium instead of face-to-face. It's way better when I don't have to see you face-to-face. It's way better this way for me. I don't have to interact with you quite as much.
Yeah, like once we're over, you can walk away and you don't have me like harassing you for the rest of the day.
Exactly. No, it's good. For those of you who don't know, Kipp and I went on a hunt with some other friends to Minnesota last week. You're 2 for 2, man, on your first 2 bow hunts, 2 kills, 2 for 2. I'm proud of you, but also like it's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
I think if you've never been bow hunting, and even if you're a hunter and you've rifle hunted, nothing against that at all, by the way, but even if you're a hunter, I think it's easy to overlook how difficult it is to successfully harvest an animal with a bow.
Yeah. And I was talking with Rick about this last week, and I said to him, I was like, well, I was just lucky, right? I had things aligned and the deer was there. It was a good shot. Anybody there could have easily made that shot. And then he reminded me, he's like, yeah, but it's all the stuff leading up to the shot that we failed to do. And it's keeping your eyes out on the horizon, seeing the deer way early, so you're prepped, so you draw when they go behind the tree. It's all of that allows the shot to be available. And those are the harder things to do, especially when you're sitting in a tree stand for 4 hours.
Yeah, it's cold and you're a new hunter, and it's really difficult. Yeah, there is a lot of prep that goes into it. I think a person can get lucky once, but you're 2 for 2. That's not luck, and you'll get better. Rick, a lot of people say Rick is really lucky. Rick is not lucky because he does it every single time. That's how you know it's not luck. But to your point about making sure that you see deer early, I actually got caught. I could have shot a really nice buck, but he came in. I was looking right because some other deer had come in, and he came in left, and I had a lane there, and I saw out of the corner of my eye. I don't know if I was just slacking or what I was doing. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and I didn't even see him till he got to my shooting lane. And I tried to stop him. He stopped just a little bit outside and past my shooting lane. And I missed a really good opportunity because I didn't have my head on a swivel and I wasn't as prepared as I should have been or aware that there was a deer. He was quiet. So anyways, really cool, man. It's exciting to go hunting with you and be a small part of your hunting journey. So
dude,
it's cool.
It's been awesome. And thanks, obviously. I made a post the other day about just how grateful I am And it's just like everything else in life, how willing people are to speak into you, to help you, to coach you, to see you win. I think there's an abundance of that in the world, but we have to be humble. We have to check our egos and be willing to ask, and you've obviously helped me and coached me a lot, in this process, even though I'm early on, and I'm just grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, and also for men, it's really important to say yes. Now, me and your wife kind of coaxed you into your first bow hunt, so you didn't really have a choice on that one. But this one you said yes to.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think how many things that I've said no to or other people say no to, and then in the very next breath, men like this will say, well, how come everybody else gets the opportunities? How come everybody else does this? How come everybody else? It's because you're not capitalizing on those opportunities. And it's unfortunate. I used to get frustrated by it, but it's not really my life. I've just learned to say yes more often. Now, there is a time and a place to say no, and you have to exercise some discernment. But if you have these kind of opportunities, then you just need to say yes. I know it's not convenient. I know you didn't have all the gear. I know you didn't feel completely adequately prepared necessarily or ready. I know that Financially, you know, there's a cost associated with it. There's all sorts of reasons to say, no, not this time. But you said yes. And you created that little margin that helped you succeed in a new way. And I wish more men would do that more often.
Yeah, totally.
Well, let's get to headlines. I've got obviously the big headline, you know, Trump wins the election. The GOP has control of Congress, both Senate and the House. And I also noticed and saw that I think the overwhelming majority of, maybe not overwhelming, but the slight majority of governors in this country are Republican governors. I mean, this was a big red wave. And I was taken back, and so much so that I actually bet against Trump. And I wanted him to win, but I bet Rick $100 a night or two before that Kamala would win. And sure enough, Trump pulled it off. So I think this is a great thing for the country. I know there's character flaws and character issues, and people say, well, he's done an alignment with your values. Right. I never said that I think on some things, yes, but he's not 100% aligned with what we teach here. And I don't want to say that's irrelevant. It's not, but it's a factor in the equation. And there's so much more that goes into this. And so I started looking at some of the things that Trump has talked about doing directly and indirectly on the first few weeks of the job. And so I have a few things here. Obviously, enact some of the remain in Mexico policies and close the border down. His new border czar looks like a complete bad A, and he is a no-nonsense, pulling no punches kind of individual, which I think is great. Obviously, we've got anywhere between 10 and 11 million illegal immigrants in the country, and the gentleman's name, I can't remember his name right offhand, but the new border czar is talking about making sure that we're actually removing these people from the country once we shut the border down. That's interesting. Another thing that I thought was interesting is just bringing agitators and aggressors to the table. You know, upon news that Trump won the election, all of a sudden Hamas is talking about negotiating a peace agreement. Russia's coming to the table talking about agreeing to negotiate with Ukraine. Even China is talking about potentially opening up conversations about economic policies. So that's interesting. And on the note of China in particular, Trump is talking about enacting tariffs. I don't know where I sit, to be honest, on tariffs. There's a lot of pros and cons. You know, obviously the con to a tariff is that cost is then going to be consumed by the American consumer. And the way that works, just really briefly, is if China is selling a widget to us for $10 and it's made and manufactured and ready to be sold here in the US for $15, obviously most consumers are going to buy the Chinese product for $10, all things being equal. And now Trump is talking about enacting a tariff which makes the price for China's cost $15. And so it makes us more competitive, which I think makes sense because China's stealing technology and intellectual property, and they're not paying people wages, and they have literally slave labor that they're relying on to build some of these things. It incentivizes, again, for us to build and manufacture things in America, but it will come at a cost. And I think over time, those costs will be driven down, especially if this is something that we can sustain long term, because we know if you take, for example, Ford, Henry Ford, I can't remember the exact numbers, but what used to take days and weeks to put a car together, he got done in every 6 minutes eventually. So things become much more effective and cost efficient over time, but that will take time. Cleaning up wasteful government spending, obviously talking about having Elon Musk come in here and clean house. He fired 80% of Twitter employees when he took over Twitter, and the thing is actually making money now. And then this was an interesting thing I heard over the weekend is reciprocity for concealed carry holders. So if you get your concealed carry permit in Utah, which I don't think you actually need it in Utah.
Not anymore.
It's a constitutional carry state.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, Maine is the same way, constitutional carry. But if you do have your concealed carry permit here, the idea is that it's going to apply nationwide in any state, which I think obviously is a good idea. Even more so, to take it even further, I would say that we just do away with needing a concealed carry permit at all because we have a constitutional right to carry firearms. But it's a move in the right direction. The only issue that I take with it, not so much with concealed carry, but I am worried about Trump and executive orders. I do not like executive orders. I get frustrated with it, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. You're usurping the will of the American people. We elect a Congress to pass laws for a reason. And when a president takes executive action, it's bypassing the constitutional system. So I don't like that. So when he's going in there and he's signing executive orders, I take issue with it. Even though some of those orders I think are a good idea, it should be done through the Congress, because you're just opening it up for abuse, misuse later on down the road. So I definitely do not approve of that. And I wish we could go back to limiting the president's power and put it back in the hands of Congress where it belongs and where it was set up to be.
Yeah, totally agree. Dude, there's so much. I was talking with someone last night about, and this kind of goes into my headline that I wanted to share. But of course, a lot of us are having conversations around the election, and we have to remember, right? We have a country that roughly, maybe, I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but 20, 30 million people voted for potentially the other party. That is a lot of people. And it's really easy for us to jump on the bandwagon and be lazy in our thinking and move to judgment of these people are dumb and these people are this, and put labels on people. And it goes both directions. And I couldn't help but think of a quote by Carl Jung over the weekend that is, and it goes as, thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. And my reason for bringing that up is the judgment doesn't help you. It doesn't help you. If I were a Democrat and we lost, the worst thing you can do is label as big orange green guy bad. That doesn't benefit you. What benefits you is understanding, why is it that the majority of the population leaned in that direction? What's the critical thinking? Why are people attracted? Why did people vote for Harris? What is it that they're what is it in their logical minds makes them feel good about that? There's value in us critically thinking and understanding humans. And I don't believe that half the country are morons. I don't think half the country chose to make a bad decision. Most of us make decisions based upon what? Some logical thinking to some extent, and we think it's the right thing. And not that we have to agree with it. There's value in understanding why people do what they do. And that just benefits us as individuals. It does allow us to have a little bit more empathy, but it allows us to grow and understand the human condition and why people do what people do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was looking at that as you were talking about this. It's significantly higher than what you initially said, okay. But and I don't know when these numbers. I'm sure these are updated and probably somewhat different, but as of right now, it says that he has, and this is from Investigative Post, 73.6 million voters for Trump. He lost voters. He had 74.2 4 years ago, and then Harris received 69.3 million votes. Biden 81.3 million votes.
Yeah.
We'll leave that there. You guys can decipher those numbers for
yourself.
yourself.
That's so suspect. I'm sorry. I don't care. Like anybody that 20 million people didn't vote this time.
Yeah.
What happened to those people?
Where did all those people go? Yeah.
It blows my mind. But anyhow, whatever.
But I mean, that's pretty interesting though. You've got 150 million people voting. And it is interesting that Trump won the popular vote as well, which was fascinating. That typically doesn't happen.
And how much of California he won.
Well, if there was a chart that I saw that actually showed a dynamic chart that showed how many areas moved red relative to how many areas moved blue from red. Yeah. It was not even close. I mean, it was really, really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Okay. Well, let's get into some questions today. Hopefully, I'll say this too, is my hope and prayer is that Trump does a good job. That he leads well, that he doesn't usurp the power of the Constitution by just taking everything upon himself. I think there is a different dynamic in him. I see him surrounded by more capable people, and he's willing to offload some of that stuff, which is interesting. Than I think more than I've seen in the past. But I'll say this too: if Kamala would have won, I would have had the same hope and prayer, and hope that she surrounded herself with knowledgeable rational, level-headed people. I think historically that hasn't been the case, but I would hope and pray for that because I want this country to win. So that's where I'm at.
And by the way, if you don't agree with what Ryan just said, then it's about what? It's about you and your ego. You want them to fail as a president so you can be right about them? Your ego's more important than the country? Are you joking? Like we should all
cut off your nose to spite your face, right?
Yeah, I mean, we should all be hoping that he doesn't screw it up.
Yeah.
So.
We'll see. Time will tell. I don't think you will, but we'll see.
Yep.
All right, man. Let's get into some questions today.
Joe Gunter from the Iron Council. Now that the IC has been going for a while and battle teams have been formed there, any thoughts in giving to the development of teams based upon regions and states? We talked about these regional chapters a little bit, but.
Yeah, and we do have regional channels and chapters. Some are more active than others. And what I would say, was it Joe? Is that right?
Joe, yeah.
What I would say to Joe is if you're in a region, by the way, in the Iron Council, guys, if you're listening to this, we have 1,000 men in there all working together. And there's a segment in there called regional chapters where guys can communicate, coordinate, create plans, get together, meet up, talk, discuss, whatever, in their specific geographical area. So, Joe, what I would say to you is go into the regional channels, look for your region. If it's not there, then let us know, and you can create one. And also, Joe, what you're doing right now, I hope you know this, is you're volunteering to head it up. Because as men, we don't come to the table with problems or things that we want without a clear solution. It may not be the best solution. It may not be the best answer, but we come with answers. And if we recognize it as a problem, then I think we have a moral imperative to take it upon our shoulders to address it. That doesn't mean we need to do it all, but if you recognize it as a problem or a gap, then it means it's important to you and you have a responsibility to address it. So if your regional channel's not there, let us know. If it is there and it's not very active, take it upon yourself to build that up so that you, and by the way, and I'm not saying Joe is doing this, but I've seen so many men who complain about abdication of responsibility in other people. Oh, this guy's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. This guy's not doing that. They're not doing this. They're not doing, and they gripe and they moan about it when the proper attitude is to be grateful that other people aren't doing it. Why? Because you have the opportunity to do it. We wouldn't be listening to this podcast if I didn't recognize a problem or I recognized a problem and I just bitched and moaned about it. And again, I'm not saying Joe's doing that, but if I just bitched and moaned about it and didn't do anything about it, somebody else would have filled the void that I filled. I looked at it as an opportunity, and this is why Order of Man is on the map where it is today, leading the men's movement, is because I wasn't upset about it. I was grateful that I acknowledged an opportunity and stepped into that path.
I love it, man. You know, Zach Allen, our next question here, it's actually not a question, it's a comment, but I want to get your thoughts around this because he points out something I think is really important when we talk about the chain of command and who do we go to in the chain of command when there's an issue. And we can relate this to work, even in our homes if you'd want to, and other areas. So his question, Zach Allen, this is more of a comment, but it's just around how battle teams work. Each one of us has a team lead. I would just encourage you to trust your team lead and take your challenges to them. I've had a small challenge and my immediate thought was to get help from the top. Then it dawned on me to just go to Troy and it worked out perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Troy Fullerton is an incredible man. So outside of just the structure of the Iron Council, he is one of the most solid human beings that I know. So yes, Troy is certainly going to help address that. But yeah, the chain of command is crucial. I learned a lot of this in the military. By the way, a couple of days ago, as of the recording of today, it's Veterans Day. And so just want to thank all the men and women who have served and who put their lives on the line and do difficult work and leave their families and suffer in order to protect our way of life. So I want to say that. But I learned this when I was in the military, this idea of the chain of command, which is that from the bottom up, if you have a problem, you go to your next echelon of leadership. You don't skip people because it's not right, and it probably won't get addressed as efficiently as if you go through the proper channels. So in this case, he went to Troy, who's his direct battle team leader. That's exactly right. if the problem didn't get resolved or there was still questions, either Troy or he would move up, and that would be a battle team leader mentor. If the problem didn't get resolved there, it would be Andrew as our battle team leader mentor coordinator. If it didn't get resolved there, it would at that point, it would probably come to me at that point, and I'd make sure that we address it. What this does is it allows an organization to run smoothly and effectively and get problems solved quickly. There's little things that come up that I, as the founder of the Iron Council, don't need to totally be aware of and be involved with. Because if you're waiting on me, you're going to be waiting a lot longer than just a quick text or phone call to Troy to say, hey, here's my issue, and he resolves it, like you said, very quickly. So it's really, really important we use the chain of command. But the place I want to take this question is from the top down. And this is something I'm learning. It's really important, just as important, that if you're going to execute a chain of command in your organization, that you also honor it as the head of the potential organization in going and working down the chain of command. So if I have an issue with a member, let's say a member, two members are getting into it and they're being inappropriate, or they're just getting after each other, or they're creating some toxicity inside of the council, I don't need to go directly to the members. I need to honor the system that we're creating, which means that I need to go first to his battle team leader mentor and say, hey, Steve and Chuck are having this issue. Will you talk with their team leaders and give their team leaders an opportunity? Because we don't want to usurp the team leaders' opportunity to serve as well. Because then what we're saying, even subconsciously and quietly, is I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I don't trust you to be able to handle this. And I do. I wouldn't have had them in that position if I didn't trust them. And if I don't trust them, then I need to let them go and find somebody I do.
Yeah.
So you got to go up the chain of command, but as leaders, we also have to go down the chain of command. And I've been learning that in Iron Council because we haven't always had this in place. So every once in a while, I'll skip a battle team leader mentor, I'll skip a battle team leader. And fortunately, we've enabled and empowered our guys to call me out when I do that. And so I've had guys say, hey, Ryan, next time, like, let me handle it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's actually the right way to do it. And we just forget sometimes. My motive is good, but execution leaves something to be desired at times.
Totally. And your authority sometimes undermines you. So in that example, you know, and maybe even more so even in the corporate world, is an executive goes schedule a meeting with a frontline worker, and that frontline worker sees that someone from the C-suite schedule a meeting with them. For the next 3 days, anxiety and stress skyrocket. They're like, what's going on, right? Why? Because they don't have a relationship with you. You're in a position of authority. Your intent could be, I just want to help these guys. But they may see it as, oh, Ryan, the founder, is meeting, I must be in trouble. And they move to fight and flight. So you're not in a position of influence. You're just in a position of authority. And sometimes that hurts you, right? And so that chain of command, I used to always think it was about responsibility, and it is. But some of it is also who's the best person that is in a position, who has an established relationship to be able to serve and coach. And it's usually not someone up higher the chain of command. It's usually their immediate manager or supervisor.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, you know, the other thing I was thinking too is I've made a shift, I think, over the past couple of years in my own personal mindset of developing leadership, and also the way that we execute it inside of our organization. I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but also a little bit of truth to it. I actually don't want to do anything.
Yeah. You're like, that's the noise.
I say a lot of the times,
yeah.
I say a lot of the times, like, I'm lazy. I don't actually want to do anything. And I'm not lazy because I bust my tail, but I say it jokingly. But I think if we're really to realize the potential that our organizations have, then I have to have that mentality.
Yeah.
Because if it was just me doing everything, not only is it not going to get done, I'm not empowering anybody else to get better.
You're not growing.
I'll give you an
anybody.
Example. Yeah. Growing anybody. That's exactly right. Yeah. So we were gone last week, and we have calls throughout the week, and one of them is a leadership call with our team leaders. And Kevin Nickel, Battle Team Romulus, on the previous week on that call, I asked him to lead the call. And he was like, I don't know, can I have my team leader do it? I said, no, I want you to do it. I asked you to do it. And he texted me after and he's like, hey, it went really well. This little hiccup, he addressed it perfectly, did a great job. And I told him, I said, look, I know initially you didn't want to do it, but I asked you to do it specifically because I recognize leadership in you and I wanted to give you the opportunity to test a little bit, to push yourself, to do something different, and to be in a better position to help you develop your leadership skills. We have to be it. Dude, I could have done it. 1,000 other people could have done it. I actually like to do it. I like the sound of my own voice. I think I do it pretty well, but I have to get out of my way and I have to get out of people that I care about's way so that they can learn and develop. And you have to create a void because if you fill that all the time, there's nowhere for people to go. And you're the bottleneck of your own organizations. You could look at that as a father. Like if you're doing everything for your children, there's nowhere for them to go. They're hitting the ceiling. And then you're the problem. Yeah. Get out of the way. Let them lead. If you're on a hike, let them lead. If you have a family activity within reason, let them be involved in the planning process. If you have an activity that you guys want to do Monday night, let the kids come up with something every once in a while. Yeah. But you got to create a little bit of a vacuum, a little bit of a void, and allow other people to rise to the top.
I love it, man. I'll share this quick story just because I think it's important to me at least, right? So I'll share it. So when I was 18, I was getting ordained at church. Mm-hmm. And my dad has not been or was not a religious man. In fact, my entire life, I may have seen him go to church like once. the entire
Christmas
time.
or Easter or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, right?
And Mom dragged him to church.
Totally. And I was like, what? He's in a suit? Like crazy. I didn't even know he owned one of those, right? And anyhow, so I was getting, when I turned 18, I was going to get ordained. And my bishop grabs me and says, hey, who do you want to ordain you? And I said, oh, you. I'll just have you do it. And he goes, aren't you going to ask your dad? And I go, he doesn't go to church or whatever. And he goes, He's like, think about it. Meanwhile, he gave me a scripture to read. And so I went home, I read the scripture, and I'll summarize. But in the story, this young man, his dad was murmuring against the Lord and complaining and all this stuff. And this young man went praying, and the Lord told him to do something, but didn't give him all the directions, just kind of like helped him a little bit. And then he went back to his dad and asked his dad what he should do. The dad that was murmuring, right, and complaining weeks before. And I read that passage and I was like, what opportunity was I robbing from my father by saying, oh, man, he's not interested. He's not he's not the priesthood holder that he should be, and all these judgments. And I was just robbing him from this opportunity of doing this important thing, and this relates, right? Sometimes when we rob people from the opportunity, like you mentioned, delegating, it's a form of service. And a lot of us just need someone to believe in us sometimes. And we just need the rep and the opportunity for someone to say, hey, I believe in you. I intentionally asked you to lead that call because I see something in you that you may not see. And man, that's super powerful when you have someone in your corner that sees you that way.
Yeah, what an incredible compliment. The other thing that's interesting about this, Kipp, is hundreds of thousands of men are going to listen to this podcast. And I can pretty much guarantee that every single man who listens to this particular episode will nod their head in approval as I say this. Don't you want to be valuable? Don't you want responsibility? Don't you want to be in charge of some important work? Don't you want to lead other people? Don't you want to be innovative? Every single one of you is going like this right now. Yep.
Yeah.
And so if you want that, it's safe to say that your brothers want that. And if they want that, then it's on you to create the opportunity for them to be valuable. Right? You in that situation, did your dad do did he do it?
No, he didn't. But he came and he participated, which I didn't think he was going to even do that part. But and the beauty of it is in hindsight, I'm just grateful that he had me ask him.
Right.
And just
what
gave
a powerful
him that
thing. I mean, even think about your bishop. He could have said yes, and he would have been flattered to do it.
Totally.
And yet he stepped out of the way. He's like, no, think about it. Here's some things to think about.
Yeah.
He's adding value to your life. You're adding value to your dad's life. Even just the fact that you asked your dad was a compliment. It made him feel valuable.
Yeah.
I wrote something else here too, is that when we're working with other people, Kipp, you and I often talk about minimum viable product. I wrote down here, minimum viable assistance. So if you're working with somebody, it's always minimum viable assistance. You know, if yesterday, I took my kid shooting with my girlfriend and her daughter and a friend. And so we went out and went shooting. And I've got this little Ruger 22 that Volkortson Firearms put together for me. It's got a little red dot on there.
Oh,
it's such an easy gun to shoot.
Dot, that's blast.
Yeah. There's no kick. You know, it's not loud. It's just a 22. It's got that little it's so easy for the kids to shoot. And my son, he's 8, you know, so he's small. And he's fine around firearms. We teach the firearm rules and everything else, and we shoot. But when I was instructing him, I didn't teach him everything. I just taught him a few little things like, hey, here's how you need to do this, and here's a way to hold it, and here's how to look at it. He's like, okay. And then he kept missing the target. I'm like, okay, well, what do you need to do? He's like, well, I don't know. Like, should I do this? I'm like, try it. So he tried it, and then he started hitting the target. This is minimum viable assistance. You don't need to solve everybody's problems. You just need to give them a little bit of a boost. Like if you're on a climbing wall, because I take the kids to climbing walls occasionally. Yeah. I don't like push them up the wall. If they need an extra thing, I put my hand right there and they step on my hand and they find the next little thing to grab onto. Minimum viable assistance always, whether it's in the family life, at work, wherever, let people work through their problems on their own and get stronger. You know, it's like at the gym. If you've got, let's say you've got 2 plates on your bar and you're you know, cranking out and you're trying to get, I don't know, do it for reps or whatever, and you get to 8 and at 9 you're like struggling, you don't want somebody to come in and just like take it and just rack it for you. You just want them to come and just put their fingertips on the bar and just a little bit of pressure to help me get 2 more reps. So maybe it wasn't exactly 225, but maybe it was 205 because you had somebody putting a little bit of pressure on there for you. That's all. Just a little bit to help them work through because that's how people get stronger.
Yeah, and that's how they learn, and that's how they build confidence. You
True.
go rack it for them, they're like, good job, man. You're like, whatever.
I wasn't good. I needed
that
10. I got 8.
Yeah, and you did the last rep for me, not me.
Yeah.
Right? And so we robbed them, right, from that confidence too. It's good stuff, man. All right, Chase Kimball, do you think that seeking external validation can inherently be cured? Or is it like a drug addiction? Do you believe that it can be more of a mindset shift once you achieve it, that it no longer plagues you? Or is this something that you will always be in your shadow, something you hide away and suppress?
Well, that's an interesting question. I saw this one this morning. Let me give you a little bit of a way to a different way to think about it. And I'm just kind of working it through my mind, so I'm not entirely sure this is the best way to explain it, but I'll say it this way because I want us to start thinking about things differently. Maybe the need for external validation isn't entirely bad. Right? Because if you think about this from an evolutionary perspective, my desire to be validated by the tribe is imperative to my survival.
Totally.
I thought about this in high school sports. You know, if I caught when I was in high school in baseball, and if I let a ball get past me and I looked around at my team and a run scored and I looked around at my team and I saw the frustration and disappointment in their eyes, they're not validating me. But it was motivation for me to get better because I didn't want to let the team down. And I had, if I made that unforced error. So I don't think, if we look at it, I don't think it's entirely bad. I think it's a matter of what kind of fuel it is for you. So if you're seeking external validation to change who you are, to manipulate behavior, to manipulate other people, or an excuse to self-destruct, or wallow in your own self-pity because you're not getting what you think you need, then that's an issue. But if you're looking for, and again, this is where the wording gets a little tricky for me. If you're wanting some I'll call it feedback, positive feedback from other people, I don't think that's entirely
and beneficial.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know you're doing good sometimes?
So Kipp, if you said to me, hey, Ryan, man, you were really on fire on the podcast today and you did a wonderful job. I mean, I'm not telling you to say that, Kipp, at the end, but if you were to say
It'd be nice. Yeah.
That's external validation, right? I don't need it. I'm going to do the podcast, whether you give that to me or not. I'm going to show up fully, whether you give it to me or not. But it also feels pretty good, and it forges a better bond between us because I like you more.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's entirely bad. I just think, what are you using it for? So I don't know that there's anything to be cured. What would need to be cured is you self-destructing, you wallowing in your own self-pity, you manipulating your own behavior or other people in order to seek that validation, but getting it from other people and being acknowledged and welcomed into the tribe, I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah. The thing I'd add to it, or maybe clarity, is validation from who also matters. Right. Especially in the world of social media, right? You can make some post and get tons of external validation from people that you don't even respect, people that you don't even know. And that's the level of validation that you seek. I mean, that could be very dangerous, right? And we got to be careful of that, especially with our children in regards to that level of validation. But the examples that you gave, they're people that are on our team, people that we value, people that we have relationships with. Those are data points. That's beneficial to us. Absolutely.
There's two questions that I ask when I'm confronted with these situations, because I do get tempted to get drawn into what other people think of me, just like we all do.
Totally.
But the two questions are this: are they right? And are they credible?
Yeah.
Now, if a stranger is telling you, let's say I post a video of me doing deadlifts, and without fail, somebody's going to come in and say, your back, your feet, or whatever, right?
Yeah. Is that all?
People are just going to do that. So the first question is, okay, well, is this even a credible person? Because if it's Joe Schmo and you look at his profile and he's 400 pounds and he hasn't done a deadlift in his entire life, I don't really need to worry about what that guy's telling me to do. But if it's Johnny Loretti and he's in the business and he's professional and he's trained thousands and thousands of people to lift properly so they don't hurt themselves and realize gains, even if I don't know Johnny, I might say, oh, that's interesting. That's a credible source of information. Is he right? And then you can measure it against other credible sources, and then you can make your decisions from there. So I don't think you even need to know a person, but you do need to know whether they're credible and whether they're right, and you can back that up typically through a little bit of research.
How do you relate this to, because I think this might be part of Chase's question as well, or other guys might be considering this. And I'm just thinking when we go down and out, right? Like I think divorce is highly difficult. Why? Because the one person, and I'm going to say it in a very harsh way, but the one person that's like committed to love you says life isn't worth going forward with you. Like it's the ultimate burn of all time, right? Like I would rather be alone than with you. And that's it's external feedback, and that hurts. And you feel lonely, you don't feel loved. And we might have seasons, right, where we feel very lonely in our families or with our spouses, or we don't think we have friends that appreciate us. And there's an element of those times where our confidence in ourselves, hope, and understanding our divine nature of who we are is super important. How do we balance that need sometimes when that validation doesn't exist for us, right?
Well, I think the divinity of who we are is crucial. You mentioned that. Knowing that you're a son of God and that you are divine and that you're here for a reason is crucial. Yeah. Because if you have that and you really have the faith in that, you don't need anything from anybody else. So that's the deepest sense of validation.
Yeah.
I would say another source of validation is validating yourself. If you go to the gym this morning, you're going to feel more, you might not look the way you want to look yet, but you're going to feel more validated about who you are now And you're not going to need somebody to come in and say, hey, you're a really hard worker. You're doing a good job. You're fit. Like, you don't need it because you already know it.
Yeah.
Like, I know I am. Now, you don't run around and say that, but you inside, you're like,
you prove to yourself.
I'm confident. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and even in a divorce, you know, I went through a divorce several years ago. And so what you're saying, you know, obviously hits true. Anybody who's gone through that has had that feeling and that experience. But I can say this with 100% certainty, that if at some point in the future I was ever dropped in the same scenario that I was several years ago, I would handle myself the exact same way that I did through this. And although there's difficult times and moments, and, you know, a lot of those times are in the past now, you know, I'm in a better spot because of the things I've done. But I can hold my head up high in spite of the things that I messed up with, and feel good knowing that, hey, if I was in that situation again, man, I feel like deeply, I believe and feel like I handled myself like the man I want to be would handle himself. And that's validating. I don't need somebody else to say, hey, you did a good job. I already know I did.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say too is that when people compliment you, just learn to say thank you. Guys, don't push it off. Don't do the false humility thing. Don't be bashful about it. Kipp, if you compliment me at the end of this podcast and say, man, Ryan, you were really on fire today. My response is simply, hey, thanks, Kipp. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not
you
going to
validate me if you excuse it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to invalidate. You believe that. Whether it's true or not is subjective, but you believe that. So who am I to say I wasn't? That's what you saw. Right. And what I would also say to that is, don't put too much weight into other people's words.
Yeah, totally.
So if you validate me in some way, Kipp, I don't need to be on cloud 9 the rest of the day. Like, it doesn't really mean it was a nice gesture. It was, hey, you did a good job. You acknowledged something that you saw. That's it. It doesn't mean I don't have to show up the rest of the day. It doesn't mean I can just be in a good mood and like everything's great and I'm amazing. No, you're putting too much weight into people's words. And by the way, the alternate is true. If, Kipp, you came to me and said, hey, man, like, you really, that was weak. Like, you were distracted. You didn't show up on time. You, like, obviously you weren't ready to be here. You were in another place mentally. And then I just carried all of that with me and I wallowed in my own self-pity for the rest of the day. And woe is me. And I'm a bad podcaster and I shouldn't be doing this. That's too much weight on another person's words. Just take it like, okay, you know what? Shit, that doesn't feel good, but Kipp, thanks for the feedback. You're right. I'm going to be better tomorrow when I show up. And that's it. Like, don't read too much into it. Yeah.
Kevin Nickel, what are your definitions of being comfortable versus becoming complacent?
That's a good question. I didn't actually see this one before. I think complacency is apathy, where you don't even really care. The motivation is gone. The desire is gone. Maybe you're resting on your laurels and you think you don't have to work hard anymore. Yeah. Almost indifferent. Yeah. Versus comfort. I'm hesitant to even use that word. I think that's what I was struggling with, but I'm just going to take it in the spirit in which I think it was intended. Comfort is maybe a place of confidence and security. Like, for example, when I get on this podcast with you, I'm comfortable. I don't get butterflies. I don't get nervous. Yeah. I'm not like jittery about it. So I'm comfortable in what we're doing here, but I also acknowledge there's room for improvement. Room for improvement in the way we communicate and articulate our message, room for improvement in technology, room for improvement in the way we market our message to the people. So I would say I'm comfortable with the job that we're doing, and that comes from a place of confidence, which stems from competence. But I also know that I want to get better and improve. And I would say that's what makes the difference.
Got it. All right, we're going to jump over to the gram. To follow Ryan there, it's at Ryan Mickler. GRV leader, what would be a good book that you would recommend for my 13-year-old son to start reading?
I mean, that's pretty broad. I mean, I'm assuming it's in the realm of leadership and maybe self-development, I would say, but Jocko stuff's pretty good. Like his kid stuff, Way of the Warrior Kid. 13's awesome. Maybe a little old for that, but I still think it's pretty, I think it still would be pretty applicable. Man, you know, like there's other books. Hatchet is one that I loved when I was a kid. I still love that book. And to me, Hatchet, if you haven't, you've read that, right?
A long time ago.
That's a good book. And it gets kids, at least it does for me, it gets boys thinking about what would I do in that situation? Yeah. How would I survive? And it gets their wheels turning, which I like. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if I ever like actually read the whole book, but I remember that being an assignment, if I remember correctly, when we were kids.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued by it. Yeah.
I like that. The other one I like is Old Man and the Sea. That's a really good book. And these aren't like self-development books, but there's so many lessons that you can talk with. Yeah, there's stories, but there's lessons and morals in the story. And then you can talk with your kids. So you could actually read it with them. And then you could say, like, you don't give them the answer, right? Minimum viable assistance. So it's questions. Hey, what'd you think about that? Would you have handled it that way? And the thing about Old Man in the Sea is there's an old man and there's a young boy who's watching this old man, this old fisher. And there's morals and lessons. That's a good story. Hatchet's a good story. Way of the Warrior Kid, same thing, stories and morals. But what I would suggest is something a little bit more covert than self-development.
Yeah.
Because if it's overtly self-development, you might lose a 13-year-old. So it's got to be a story form. It's got to be fun. I would read the book with them and then discuss over dinner and talk about, well, what would you do in that situation? Or how would you do this? Or how would you do that? And I know at least for Hatchet, there's a movie based on the book. And so you guys could read the book together, talk about it, and then watch the movie at the end. You know, stuff like that is what I would do. But I would stay away from the hardcore self-development stuff and just keep it to good short stories that will help, obviously, their reading skill, but also their comprehension and the way they think, critical thinking skills, all of that kind of stuff.
Did you hear that they're making a Way of the Warrior Kid movie?
I did hear that. Isn't Chris Pratt is
involved somehow? I don't know if he's Uncle Jake.
I think he's the uncle. I think he's the uncle.
Yeah. That's
Jocko
awesome.
Should be the uncle, but
that's what I think too. I'm like,
I mean,
because that's
if
what
you can't get Jocko,
anyway,
I guess Chris Pratt's a good pick too. Chris Pratt's a horrible backup for Jocko, but you know it'll do.
Oh man. Okay, Sparky Char 28. How can a former liberal navigate aligning with a new party? A former liberal navigating aligning to a new party.
I think you just spend time around those individuals and you research it. You know, I think actually you probably have an advantage over somebody who's always been, for example, a conservative. You know, we can get just as stuck in our ways as anybody else, obviously. And we create echo chambers and we don't look for other information, and the news sources that we gather are just reaffirming our previously held beliefs. But you're coming from a place that was not only did not believe that, believed a lot of things that were antithetical to what conservatives believe. So I think that gives you a great advantage because you can now come into this with a level head and say, okay, well, let's explore this policy, for example, and let's play it out. Okay, it's in theory, it's really good. It makes sense, but here's the problems. And you're coming at it from a liberal side, a liberal perspective, and you might be able to round out a thought process a little better maybe even than I can. So I think if you approach it with a level of humility, with a level of curiosity, then I think over time you'll see and you'll start to formulate your own conclusions. And I don't know. I don't really know what else I'd give you outside of that. What do you think?
I think there's just, I mean, I get triggered by the like aligning to a new party. Like F that.
Yeah, of course, right.
Like don't align to any party. What's your independent thought process and what works for you? And stop the having to align to a party. I hate it. I can't stand it when I get a text message about like donate to a GOP candidate or because I'm a Republican. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm Kipp Sorensen. I have independent thoughts and feelings, and I'm not going to outsource it to a tribal group so I can be lazy in my thinking.
I think that's well said.
I think you're better off that way than trying to align with anybody.
Well, I think the key too here is, and I wish I would have said what you said because it's dead on. I mean, it's so accurate. But the key here is that you acknowledge, this is one thing I think a lot of people with Trump do, is they don't acknowledge his flaws.
Yeah, and you should. Like what you said about the executive order, spot on. I watched that video and he's like, I'm doing an executive order. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like that, right? And we should have that level of critical thinking versus like, okay, well, whatever the MAGA does, I'm good. It's like, no, that's stupid too.
The problem with that is that, you know, and the liberals and the conservatives got into issues. Liberals mostly when they started to do the filibuster stuff, and Mitch McConnell said, you guys are going to regret this when the tables are turned. And sure enough, the tables turned and they regretted those decisions. So you got to think about that. You know, if Trump comes in and does all these executive orders over a 4-year period, and then I'm assuming J.D. Vance will be the next nominee, it goes up against whoever the liberal nomination is going to be, and that person wins.
Undo all that stuff.
They not only undo it. I mean, Trump sets a precedent, and now executive orders are getting passed that we don't agree with. And are we going to be up in arms and pissed off about that? Probably. And yet some of these people were the biggest advocates for the executive orders that Trump enacted. So I get that there's policy that we like, but we have to do it the right way. Otherwise, we're opening up a world of hurt when somebody's in office that we don't like. There's checks and balances in place for a reason. And to his point, this is, I think the point we're making here is you can align with a candidate closely, but you're never going to align 100% with a candidate. And you shouldn't, because you should have your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own dreams and your own ways that you look at it. And I think as a former liberal, like you're saying, you have a rounded out perspective. I probably would not have agreed with any of the policies that you did, but you have a rounded out perspective that maybe I don't have because I haven't been in that situation.
Yeah. And it says a lot about you too, to be like, hey, how do I align? Like that is form of independence, right? You're like, hey, how do I pivot and adjust, and how do I evolve in my thinking? It's perfect. So that's great. Yeah. Canillas JR, what is your take on the political left? And not the, like, modern progressive woke, but just your take on the political left. I don't know what he's
more
looking
like
for
classical liberalism, I think, is probably what he's talking about. Yeah. I mean, sure. I heard this quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was, if you're a conservative before you're 20, you have no heart. If you're a liberal after you're 20, you have no brain. I was like, that's actually
so
pretty
awesome.
good.
Yeah, that's
pretty. It's pretty accurate, actually. So, I think if I were to play that out, I think there's some classic liberal policies that are they're based in empathy and kindness and compassion towards humanity.
Yeah, yeah.
But taken to the extreme, now we have, hey, let's accept people for who they are. Let's help them. Let's embrace them as Americans. You know, that's the classic liberal thought process. And now it's like, let's let boys be girls. And then not only embrace them, let's pay for their gender surgeries, and let's, you know, indoctrinate everybody else to believe this. And so it's that thought process taken to the extreme. And I would say most conservatives, at least the conservatives I know, they don't hate people who are transgender. They don't hate gay people. They're not afraid of those people. That's the thing, like when people say transphobia. I'm not afraid of it. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's helpful. I think it's dangerous to our children, even to the children who are going through these gender reassignment surgeries and irreversible medication to stop their growth and stop the natural development of hormones in their bodies. It's not a good thing. But I also have people in my life who are transgender, people who are non-binary, as they would refer to themselves as. I still love them. I still care about them. I want what's best for them. but I don't think that path is going to serve them well. So I would say generally that classic liberalism is more about, hey, how do we embrace people? How do we try to understand who they are? How do we support the disenfranchised? How do we help those who are in situations that are outside of their own, that maybe didn't have the same advantages that I maybe had or somebody else listening didn't have? And so let's try to help them in a reasonable way, but still allow them the responsibility to manage their own life, but help. Yeah. And now it's, hey, we're not going to help. We're going to do everything for them. We're going to validate their poor decision-making process. We're going to take responsibility, the U.S. government that is, for their well-being. It's just taken to the extreme, and that's the issue. But conservatives can be just as extreme. You know, when we talk about economic policy and we talk about, you know, what's best for the entirety of the country, and we talk about the religious perspective, and we talk about the importance of our national sovereignty, all of those things are good and fine, but taken to the extreme, they can turn into violence, and they can turn into, alienating people. So it's a double-edged sword.
I've latched on to this concept from a leadership perspective, and we could see this from a social, political perspective. You could see this as parenting. You could see this in organizations. And what the biggest thing that we fail to realize is when you rescue someone, you rob them of growth and the ability to build confidence. We used the analogy of lifting weights earlier, right? Like, okay, this last rep is really hard and I just grabbed the bar from you. And I'm like, I'll curl it for you. Well, okay, we helped them curl, but did they get the benefit from those last reps of the curl? No. Who did? I did. So I robbed them from growth, from development, and from confidence that they could do it. And I just did it for them. And then tomorrow, when that rep gets hard, who do they look for? The rescuer. And we rob them again. And we rob them again. And so it's not that we don't want to help people. It's we need to understand the human condition and what is really helping. It's not getting the fish for them. It's pointing them to water. Mm-hmm. That is where you really help people. And it's a little bit sick, and I don't think we're all this way, but sometimes when we want to rescue people, we rescue them because it's a form of validation for ourselves, because we are needed. Look at me. I'm required here. Everyone needs my help. I have to be the one to save everybody all the time. And we get wrapped up in our ego, and we realize that we're not benefiting our children, our employees, or our society when we jump in and save them too much.
Yeah. I wrote this down as you were saying that. I think both sides of the aisle, taken to the extreme, become very arrogant and egotistical.
Yeah.
And I think the left tends to manifest that through
love.
I know better than you. I can do this because you can't do it for yourself. I'm God. Like, I am the savior.
Totally.
And I think where on the conservative side of the aisle, it's arrogance, but it usually manifests itself in, look at me, I did all of this by myself. In spite of everything around me, I did everything. It's all me. I am God because I did this for myself.
Totally.
So I think both sides have that ego complex that just manifests in different ways.
Totally. Okay, man, we're up on time.
Let's do one more real quick.
Oh, no, that's a bad question.
Chris, I forgot what it was. I saw it. But.
Yeah, it was like, how did you let Kipp beat you?
Or something? Yeah,
totally.
I did see that.
Bad question. All right. Bodine Kindle, what's the best way to get motivated to get back into the gym if you've been out of it for a while? I just can't seem to get myself there.
Okay, cool, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So with Chris, though, that question is such a loaded question. It's like asking somebody, why do you beat your wife? It's like, what? Like, what makes you think Kipp beat me? What are you talking about? How did you let Kipp beat you? What is he even talking about?
Yeah, what are you talking about, Chris?
All right, let's go to that motivation one. Yeah, motivation is hard when you've been out of it for a while. You get yourself into patterns and habits and loops that you're just so accustomed to. Yeah. So it can be a challenge. What I would say, and I think the old me would have said, you just do it.
Jocko answer.
I don't think that's sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
but
it
if
has
you
a time
would,
and a
you
place.
would, right? Like sometimes people can't get past that.
Yeah.
Like that's not enough, you know?
It has a time and a place. You know, like Kipp, for example, you're disciplined, but let's say you went through a dry spell or, you know, you're having a bad week. I'd be like, Kipp, stop being a little bitch. And like, it's time to get up and you just go back and do it. And that might actually really work for you.
Yep.
But for other people, it might be disempowering.
Yep.
If I said, stop being a little bitch, like just go do it. They're like, I already feel like that. And you're just making me feel worse now. So now I'm doubly not going to do what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to dig in my heels and be even worse about it. So for that person, what I would say is you have to make it fun. If you're, after being alive for 43 years, if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. I don't do shit I don't like to do. I might do it once. I might do it if I have to. Somebody might like coerce me into doing something because I feel obligated or sorry or bad if I don't, but it won't last for long. I promise you. And I think most people are probably the same. So if you're hearing us and we're telling you go to the gym and go lift weights or go do jujitsu, and that doesn't sound appealing to you, I mean, you might do it for a day or a week, but you're not going to sustain that. So what is it that you like? Do you like to walk your dog? Do you like to hike? Do you like to swim? What sports did you play in high school if you did at all? What sports would you wish you would have played? If you played a sport and you can't now because of some physical limitation, what's similar to that? What's close to that? You know, there's things like, this is kind of funny, but like pickleball, you know, that's a big trend, a big movement. It has been for years. And people make fun of it. It's like, the best way to describe it is like miniature tennis for kids or something. And yet
it's tennis for people that are not athletic.
Right. Yeah. It's ping pong tennis is what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like, but it's fun.
It's a
and if it
blast.
gets you outside and it gets some vitamin D for you and you're meeting other people and you're competing and you're moving your body. The last time I played pickleball, I thought I pulled my hamstring. So maybe that it's not that weak of a sport, or maybe I'm just getting old. I swear it like snapped and I keeled over and just like balled up. But the point I'm making here is do something you like and don't kill yourself just yet. So if you're like, you know, no, I do like going to the gym. I do want to lift weights. I do see value in that. Great. You've been out of the gym and on the couch for 10 years. If you go balls to the wall and you do 2 a days for the next week, you're burning yourself out. I promise you. All I want you to do today is to get up and just go spend 20 minutes in the gym. Pick 3 exercises. You know, maybe do bench press, a shoulder exercise, and some curls. And that's it. Yeah. And then go home. That's it. That's all you need to do today. And then tomorrow you can do some, you can even do machines if you don't want to get into the heavy weights yet, but you can do some seated leg curls, leg extensions, and a hack squat. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah. Or is there, you know, Bodine, you like football, you like basketball, figure out when that game is, and you watch that game while walking on the treadmill at the gym.
Yeah.
Done.
Yep.
Right? Like find a way. You know, I'm going to take a different angle on this a little bit of just kind of my takeaway to you answering Bodine's question here. But I really feel like if I end up, you know, forming my own business again in the future, right, and I go working for myself, I really think that one of the values that are going to be incorporated into that company is fun. Like we're all about getting after it and being successful and having fun. And there's just something to be said for just loving what you do and having a good time and probably not taking yourself as serious as you are, which is big for me to say because my default is just to always grind everything out and everything's serious and it's not fun. But I realize, man, life is too short, and there's just joy when you can show up and enjoy whatever it is that you're doing, even if it's work. Yeah.
And it won't feel as heavy, right? It won't feel like I even think about like hunt camp last week. Yeah. If everything was so serious and just we have to do this, we all would have been miserable because all of us failed in some way or another, right?
Yeah.
And yet think about we were just teasing each other and making fun of each other and making fun of ourselves and laughing and telling jokes. Like, it was just a fun environment, and it makes it enjoyable, and it makes it something that you want to go do again. So totally. Yeah, I would in this case link you being motivated to you doing something that you just enjoy. You don't have to like grind everything out.
Yeah, I love that. That's good, man.
Okay.
Well, our calls to action, I mean, I think a couple things. I mean, the guys talked about, you know, we had some IC questions around regional meetups and whatnot. And I think maybe a call to action for guys that aren't in the IC is one, you can learn more about it by going to orderofman.com/Iron Council. But if you haven't, join us in the Facebook group. You know, sometimes those guys on the Facebook group, they'll do regional meetups. They'll communicate those meetups within the Facebook group, and you can get connected with some of the guys of Order of Man and the Iron Council through that membership. And that's facebook.com/group/Order of Man. And of course, connect with Mr. Mickler on X and Instagram @Ryan Mickler.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Kipp. Guys, great questions today. Hopefully, as I say every week, we gave you some things to consider as you were asking those questions. Keep them coming. We've got probably another half dozen or so questions that we'll get to. And if we didn't hit yours and tackle yours today, we will next week. All right, guys, we will be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.